Baruch Hashem, Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Avodah Zarah Daf Nun, Avodah Zarah 50, and we're going to start in the bottom of Mem Tes Amud Beis, the new chapter, with the first mission of that chapter, Parak Rabbi Yishmael. So today's Daf is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, that's all for the Shuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. Rabbi Yishmael says, Sholosh Avanim Zu B'tzad Zu B'tzad Markolis. So if there are three stones on the ground next to Markolis, Markolis was the name of an idolatry, that they used to worship. The Tosfos says that the actual name was Kiwus, which means praise, and Mar means bitter, that they gave it a bad name by calling it that. But the way they worshipped it was by taking two stones and piling and putting on top of them a third stone. So that for sure would be prohibited. But let's say you just found three stones next to it, then it's going to be asur, so it's prohibited. Ushtayim, but if you find two stones, it'll be mutar, it'll be permitted. I was thinking that in the Torah, we have the obligation to write the Torah on stones, and the tablets are stones. So some use the stones for idolatry, but we use the stones for the Torah. That's a distinction Rabbi Yishmael makes. If it's three, it's prohibited. If it's two, it's permitted. So it depends whether or not you think that the stones are with the Markolis. If it appears like it's with it, then it's problematic. Otherwise, it's permitted. It makes sense why the rabbis are of the position that you worship broken. It makes sense, Rabbanan Kasavi Ovdin Lishvarim. It makes sense because the rabbis must be of the opinion that even though the idols break, people still worship it, and therefore, nearest emo, if it looks like it's with the Markolis, the Iko Meimer Minei Nafal, we could say, it fell from the Markolis, Asuros, it's prohibited. She'ein nearest emo, but if it doesn't appear with it, with Taurus, it's permitted. Rabbi Yishmael draws a distinction between 3 and 2. What kind of distinction is that? Micah Savar, what's his opinion? If he thinks they worship broken pieces, then even also 2 should be prohibited. And he ain't and if he doesn't think that they worship the broken pieces, then even 3 also should not be a problem. So Amar Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, where they know that for a fact that the stones fell from the Markolis, everyone say it's prohibited. Even if you're in a position that they don't worship the broken pieces. So therefore, why does Rabbi Yishmael say it's okay with 2? But so he says, so Gemara says, but when do we say that you don't worship broken pieces? Where it's idolatry, where it's not the typical manner of a hacha the mikara tabor mispray the mikara tabor mispray hainu orche. So in this case, since it's typically going to break, that's the normal way because the stones are piled up, and so they typically will fall off and shatter. Where is there the dispute between Rabbi Yishmael and the Rabbanan? Bistama b'mikorvos. We're talking about stones. We don't know if they fell, but they're close. They're within. They're within the first am and a half, because. And also with stama where they're there, b'mikorvos nami. If they're close, if it's very close, it's within an am and a half on top of 50A. Everybody would say it's part of the Markolis and it's prohibited. Where they're farther away, between 1.5 to 4 amos. And Rashi says betoch arba amos, within 4 amos. So beyond 1.5, but within 4 amos. So therefore, that's where there's an argument. So the question is whether or not we assume that it came from the Markolis. But it says you find them next to Markolis. My bitzad arba amos a day. Within it's 4 amos. That's what it means. Rabbi Yishmael savar osim Markolis kata mitzad Markolis gadol. He says that sometimes they would make a little Markolis next to a big Markolis, and so therefore shalosh Therefore, if it's 3 stones, the damian markoas, where it's similar to the markoas, it's asurus, it's prohibited. Shtayim, but if it's only 2, it's mutaris. Whereas Rabbanan Sari ain't also markoas katan, but some markoas gadol. He says the rabbis say they never make a small markoas. They want to make it at 3 and make it at 2. The only issue is niros imo asuros she'enos imo mutaros. If it appears like it's with it, then it's still part of the Avodah Zarah. But if it's not part of it, then we're going to say it's broken pieces and it's permitted. So that's the position of the Rabbanan. Okay. So now the Gemara says, let's analyze this statement. I'm a Mabia, do a Shinashar. If we know for sure that it fell off, this was the statement that Rabbi Yochanan made. If we know for sure that it fell off from the Markos, everyone will say it's prohibited, even according to the one who says that we don't worship broken pieces. In this case, we would say that they do. So that's a statement. That Rabbi Yochanan made. Is that really the case for Aminu? But we have a contradiction to that, because we learned in the Brisa, that the ones that appear with it are permitted, the ones that are not appear with it are the ones that appear with it are prohibited, that don't appear with it are permitted, because we say it didn't fall from it. Rabbi Shmuel says 3 are prohibited, but 2 are permitted within its 4 amos. So therefore, we see there Chachamim are saying even where we know it fell from it, that the Chachamim is going to be, if it doesn't appear with it, it's permitted. Whereas Rabbi Shmuel, it's 2. So we're talking about the 2 is permitted. So we're saying that even if you know it fell from it, these are the criteria. So I'm a Rabbi, don't say in that brayta where they know that it fell from it, but rather we say must be. Read it, Ema Shenimtsu, that is found next to it. Gemara says, but does it really say if it's found next to it, that it's prohibited? That Rabbi Shmuel would say it's allowed. The Summer Rabbi Shmuel Shtein Mutara says that Rabbi Shmuel really say 2 is allowed, but we have a contradictory brayta. Tanya Rabbi Shmuel Amar Shtein Betvisa, well, Asuros, Shalosh Merachakos, Asuros, Shalosh Afil Merachakos Asuros. Rabbi Shmuel says if you have 2, but if it's within 1 reach, it's prohibited. So it's a contradictory brayta. But if it's 3, even as far away, it's always prohibited. So what does that mean? That if it's 2, if it's 1 reach, it's prohibited. When earlier Rabbi Shmuel said 2 are permitted, 2 stones. So Amarava lo kasha kama tvisa achas kama shtei tvisos. No, it depends if it's 1 reach or 2 reaches. What is 1 reach versus 2 reach? Hey, what's the scenario? You could go v'beinu that there's like a barrier in between, let's say a pile of earth in between, and therefore you need 2 reaches to pick up the stone. So then even though it is normally 2 stones will be prohibited, but if there is a tfisa in between, it's going to be permitted. So the Gemara says, "Umarkoas ki agavni havni." The Gemara says, would we really have a markoas like this, one next to the other? Meaning to say, aren't they piled up like a pyramid? Why do we say that if they're found next to each other, that would really be a sign? And it's a markoas. It's like a pyramid, one on each side and one on top. No, that's by the essential markoas. That's the start. But the little mini markoas, they would do it even 3 next to each other. So the house of Yanai the king got destroyed, and the idolaters came and they made a markoas there. Also, so other idolaters came, and they don't worship markoas. So Shakwinu, these other ones came, they took it, and they used it to basically pave the roads. There's some rabbis who said, I'm not going anywhere near this, it's idolatry, and they went away from it. And there are other rabbis who didn't separate. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan, the son of the holy ones separated from them, and we're going to go on them. Who is the son of the holy ones? That's Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Simai. Why is he called the son of the holy ones? Now, feel bit sorta de zuzo mistako. He wouldn't even look at the form of a coin. If that coin had an idolatry on it, he wouldn't even look at it. My time in the man the parish. What's the reason why? By the way, why is he called the Benan Shel Kedoshim? Why is he called the Benan Shel Kedoshim, the son of the holy ones? So here we're saying that if he was the holy one, why is he called the son of the holy ones? It's because he was giving honor to his parent. So Maninu Benan Shel Kedoshim. Who is that? So we said that was Rabbi Nachum ben Rabbi Simba. My time in the man the parish. What's the reason why some did not walk on this road? Several Rav Gido, Rav Chia bar Yosef. They held like Rav Gido said in the name of Rav Chia bar Yosef. That what did he say? How do we know that Tikroves Avodas Kochavim? That's something that was offered to idolatry, not the idolatry. The idolatry itself we know can be nullified by the idolaters. But how do we know that the idolatry, the offering, and this is the case of an offering, because if you're throwing the stones, the stone is the offering. So the idolatry itself can be nullified, but how do we know that the offering can never be nullified? So they attach themselves to Baal Peor and they ate from the offering. Just like the dead body can never be nullified. After Krovas, so to the offering and idolatry can never be nullified. Uman the low parish, and the one who did not separate. Amar ba'ina ke'ein panim v'leika. He said the only way I say that the offering is never nullified is if the offering was made ke'ein panim, in manner similar to the way it was done in the temple. The offerings in the temple, that was a tikroves, because it's are called tikroves, because it says Zovecho lelo lelohim yechareim bilti Hashem levado. So it has to be similar to an offering in the temple in order to be called an offering. And these stones are never worshipped inside the temple. So you need be'ina kein panim v'leka. So Amar Rav Yosef bar Abba, Ikla Rabba bar Yirmiyah la'asr. And Rabba bar Yirmiyah came to a place. Va'asa va'aisi masnisa biyadeh. He brought a braisa in his hand, and he didn't understand it. And so therefore, the Gemara is going to discuss that one. And then later on, the Gemara is going to discuss another scenario where it's a similar story where he showed up and didn't understand. What does he say? Ovi kochavim shehevi avanim min hamarkolos. Let's say there is an idolater that brought stones from the Markolis, v'chifa bahen derachim v'tartayos, and the idolater brought stones from the Markolis and he used it to cover up roads and streets. Mutaros. Then we're going to say it's permitted. But if Yisrael shehevi avanim min hamarkolis v'chifa bahen derachim v'tartayos asuros, and if the Jew brought it, we're on top of Nirama Beis, we're going to say that it's prohibited. And he said, V'leis nagar v'lo bargar na'argar the Yifrakine. And he says there's no chacham or a son of a chacham who can explain this. And we're going to say, what's the problem with this? But that's what he said. So Rav Sheshes, ana lo nagar, ana v'lo bar nagar ana. Rav Sheshes says, I'm not a scholar, I'm not the son of a scholar, uparikna. I'll explain it. Pariknale. My kashalei the Rav Gidel. Why is the problem of Rav Gidal? He's saying, why is this prohibited in the case of the Jew? Why can it never be nullified? Meaning to say, he's saying, what's the problem for Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah? What's bothering him? My kashu, the Rav Gidal, that he's bothered by Rav Gidal. That how could the idolater? How can we say it's nullified and you can walk on it? Didn't we say that the stones can never be nullified? And I'll tell you why it's not a problem. But panim, like no, the only way it's like an offering is if it's done in the manner of the offering in the temple. And we don't have that here. But now, since we brought a story of where Rav Yosef bar Abba showed up to a place, where Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah showed up to a place and had a problem, we have another example which is not connected at all to ours, other than with the same character. Amar Rav Yosef bar Abba, Ikla Rabba bar Yirmiyah Asrin, V'asa v'aisi masnisa biyadis. Rabbi Yirmiyah brought a brayza. He says, what's the brayza? Matlian umezamin b'shvius. We can basically, these are basically techniques to protect the health of the tree on the sabbatical year, that we can remove the worms from the tree, and we could also put some fertilizer on the tree to protect the tree from rotting. We could do that in the sabbatical year because it's not improving the tree; it's just maintaining it. The ain matlim mazamin b'moed, but we can't do this on Chol Moed because there the concern is too much work, and so therefore we're not going to allow it on Chol Moed. Kan v'kan ein magzimin v'sachen shemen. And in both cases, we don't basically cut back the trees or put oil on them, like an ointment on them, on the cut off part, in the both in Chomoid and the sabbatical year. Both nagar v'lobar nagar v'yifrakine. And there's no chacham who can explain this to me. So Amar Avina ano nagar ana v'lobar nagar ana umefrakina. So the Gemara is going to have several attempts to try to explain. And first I have to say, what's the problem? And then we could try and give an answer. So my kakashu, what was bothering Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah? What was bothering was him ilim and moed hashvius kakashu. Maybe he's bothered by what's the distinction between the chol moed and shvius? Why at the very beginning do we say that on the sabbatical year it's prohibited to do matzlin and mazamin, but in chol moed you can? On the sabbatical year you can't deworm the tree and put the manure on the hole, but on the Chol Moed you can't. So what's the distinction? Why in the sabbatical year is permitted? Moed asar, and why in Chol Moed is prohibited? Midami shvius melacha asar rachmana asar rachmana. They're not all the same. In the sabbatical year, work is what's prohibited, but meaning to say, that's something that just takes a lot of time. It's not classified as work on the land. That would be permitted. Whereas Chomoid, something that's a hardship, is nam yasar. So therefore, what's the problem? Says Ravina. What's the problem? The problem must be Ella is zium agizum kampashli. That why in the case of zium, where you're basically putting the medicine on the tree, do we say that is going to be permitted on Shvius and prohibited on Chol Moed? Gizum is going to be always prohibited. So Ziyam Gizum Kashul. Mashna Ziyam Deshari. Why is Ziyam permitted on the sabbatical year? Mashna Gizum, where you prune back the tree, Daser, Midami, Ziyam Ukume Ilana Vishari. Ziyam is just about maintaining the tree, it's permitted. Whereas Gizum Avruye Ilani Vasa, whereas Gizum is about making the tree stronger and stronger for next year, and that's going to be prohibited. Elaziyam Aziyam Kakashuay. So no, we have a problem with this. So we have another problem. We have a problem from Ziyam, but not internally, but for a different source, because the Katani Matlin Mazamim Bishvius. So we say in one source it says over here that in our brisa it says you can deworm the tree and put the ointment on it in the sabbatical year. But we have a contradictory Mishnah in Shavias. And what does that Mishnah say? Mezamenes and etios, that v'korchanosan, v'kotmanosan, v'osan and button, mashkanoso ad Rosh Hashanah. That it says that you could basically put the ointment on the saplings and you could wrap them up and you can be kotemosan, basically prune them back and make for them fences around them. You can irrigate them all the way up until Rosh Hashanah, which implies out of Rosh Hashanah in Bishvi slow, but not in the sabbatical year. So that's a contradiction. The Dilma, that's not a contradiction, says the Gemara. Dilma could have looked for Barchama, Damar look for Barchama. Trey Kishkushe have Chada Avriye Lane, and Asar Vachado is Tume Pili Vishari. There's two types of Kishkushe. These are diggings underneath the olive trees. That not all diggings are the same. One is to make the tree hell stronger, and that's prohibited, and one is just to fill up the cracks so it doesn't die, and that's permitted. Maybe there's two types of applying this ointments. One is maintenance, and that's okay. One is basically to improve it, and that's going to be prohibited. It says that you're not, in each case, it says you can't apply the ointment. Before the zeomin is applying the fertilizer. It says in the sabbatical that you can't apply the ointment in the sabbatical year. So sicha sif kasher, the katani sachin shemel exom bein b'moy bein b'shvius, because it says in both cases, that you're allowed to apply the oil on to the stump, both on Chol Moed and on sabbatical year. You're allowed to do that ointment. But we have a contradictory Mishnah. What does the contradictory Mishnah say? The Mishnah Shavuos, that you're allowed to put the oil on these figs. So at Rosh Hashanah, you can put the holes in them and fatten them up until Rosh Hashanah, which implies at Rosh Hashanah in Bishvi slow, only until Rosh Hashanah, but not a sabbatical year. Midami, Hachi ukume ilana v'shari, asam pitume pira v'aser. No, again, it's not the same. It shouldn't even be a question. One is to just maintain the tree, that's permitted, and one is to make a better fruit, that's prohibited. So Amrulay Rav Sama, Braid Rav Asher, Ravina Bar Yirmiyah, Sticha de Moed Aziyum de Moed Kakoshle. Why is Sticha, the anointing of the tree, allowed on the Chol Moed, but the Ziyum, the putting the manure on it, prohibited on Chol Moed? Milchte Hayuk Me, both are maintenance. Maishna Hadashari, Maishna Hadasar. So why is the Sticha permitted and the Zilma is prohibited? So Gemara answers, that's why he says, listen, I'm no scholar, son of a scholar, that I am able to answer this question. So says the Gemara goes on, the Gemara continues back to discuss Avodah Zarah. It says, when is a person chayav for Avodah Zarah? If there's an idolatry that you worship it with a stick, meaning to say you make a sound before it, like you're playing the drums. Once you break the stick in front of it, you're going to be liable, because that's similar to avodah in the temple, which is like when you slaughter the neck of the animal. But if you just throw the stick down in front of it, then you're going to be exempt, because there's nothing like this in the temple. Meaning to say that the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that if they're all the avodos that you worship them that are worshipped in a normal manner in the temple. So if you did that for Avodah Zarah, whether it's a typical way of worshiping the Avodah Zarah or not, you're liable. And it says, meaning to say that something that was simple, that was supposed to be served for God, if you do it for Avodah Zarah, you're going to be liable. But something that is not Shayach B'fnim, something that is not applied inside, you're only liable if it was the typical way to serve it. So basically, here, since this wasn't the typical way, since the typical way was that they would, let's say, break the stick, but you took that they would bang the stick, but you took the stick and you worshipped it by breaking it, then we're going to say that that's like a service in a temple and you're liable. But if you just throw it down in front of it, that's exempt, because that's not the typical way of worshiping the idolatry, and there's nothing like that in the temple. Wait, wait a second. Breaking is like slaughtering, while throwing it down is like sprinkling. No, I need to have uh, a sprinkling that's like the sprinkling of the dam that's not connected to the ground, but the blood breaks apart with its sprinkling and falls drips by drips. But here we don't have that because the stick doesn't break while it's being poured. So Gemara challenges Rava from this. Esvei, Safa Slay. So let's say he fed the idolatry feces, or if he poured in front of it a utensil of urine, chayav, he's going to be liable. Why is he liable for the feces? It's not breaking apart. So, no, we're talking about moist feces, so it does break apart. And therefore, that's the assumption. So Gemara says maybe this is a dispute amongst the Tanaim, where we say shachat lachagav. Let's say you slaughtered a locust for idolatry. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev v'chachamim potrim. Rabbi Yehuda says you're liable. Chacham says them. Mar savar amrina kein zvicha. Mar savar lo amrina kein zvicha. Okay, panim. So one says you need like slaughtering, and you need another one says we need something like literally bifnim, service in temple. No, Gemara says kuli lo amrina kein zvicha. Ela kein panim ba'init. Shani chagav, the case of look is different. All of it's savaro domo it's savar behima because its neck is like the neck of an animal. We're going to do this last piece again. Baruch Hashem, Mir Hashem. Tomorrow we're just starting the discussion. We'll get into it tomorrow. Yashikoch to everybody.